Oh, with me today is Dawie Roodt. He's an economist from the Efficient Group. Hi, Dawie. Nice to see you again.
Always nice talking to you, Linda.
So much has been happening with this threat of war hanging over Israel and Iran. What effect does this have on the world economy and on South Africa?
Yeah, I think the context is important before I try to answer your question. And the context is that we've got a lot of disruptions. I'm referring to things like, for example, political changes globally, not only in the United States, but in Europe, there are some significant political changes. We've got tariffs, and we have sanctions against Russia, for example. We have the US dollar that is probably overvalued even where it is at the moment. We have countries moving away from the US dollar in terms of using that as the most important reserve currency. The dollar will remain the most important reserve currency for a long time. So I think that is kind of the context, and of course, many other things as well. So we have seen recently that the US dollar is under pressure, and I think the US dollar is likely to keep on falling against the major currencies, like, for example, the euro. Until my number is about 120 or so against the euro within the next couple of months. So I think that's important to understand. Now we have this conflict in the Middle East. Of course, usually what happens, and I've had a look at what usually happens to the oil price during previous conflicts in the Middle East, especially when countries that are oil producers are involved. And what is happening currently is it's absolutely normal based on what happened previously. So you usually get the spike in the oil price, and we're actually seeing that exactly now. But usually what you find is that the US dollar also appreciates because that is seen as the safe haven. That is not happening now. And also, what if history is anything to go by, so you see this initial spike in the oil price, and then after a couple of months or even shorter, the oil price will stabilize, and then the oil price will return to its previous level and quite often fall below its previous level. And the reason for that is easy to understand, because the increase in the oil price means that oil becomes more expensive, people consume less oil, that's put a dampening effect on global economic growth, less demand for oil, and when the political tension abates a little bit, you find that the oil price comes back and actually falls to below the previous level. So, and I suspect that we can expect the oil price to do that as well. Just an important note, and that is, remember that the US dollar itself is falling. So we see this increase in oil price in the US dollar terms, but in euro terms, the increase in oil price is actually less. So in the short term, I expect the oil price to go up and then gradually to start coming down in the medium longer term. What is it? Of course, that really depends on what's going to happen next. Who's going to get involved next? Will it be another oil-producing country? If that should happen, and if more countries get involved, then of course all bets are off the table. But for now, based on what happens usually in the past, is that the oil price is likely to spike and then stabilize and then start coming back. And I won't be surprised if we see the oil price back below 70 or even lower, 65 to the US dollar within 2 or 3 or 4 months or so. What does it mean for South Africa? The South African currency, where it is currently at about 18 or so to the US dollar, the rand has been doing actually quite well recently, but I would say that was more a function of a weaker US dollar. Now the rand is under a little bit of pressure because oil is our most important import product. That is part of the reason, and some other reasons as well. Perhaps the South African rand is more reflective of global sentiment of what is happening in the Middle East at the moment. So the rand is a little bit under pressure, but I think the rand is also likely to stabilize again and start appreciating against the US dollar as the US dollar continues its gradual fall over time. So I'm not too concerned. I think that's a short-term answer to what is happening in the Middle East at the moment. We could see a bit of an increase in the oil price and the petrol price and so on, but within 2 or 3 months or so, I think that is going to return to previous levels. As far as inflation is concerned in South Africa, we have the most recent inflation numbers just below 3%, which is actually a very good number. I think the Reserve Bank is likely to sit on their hands and not make any changes to interest rates yet because of the uncertainty in the Middle East. But without a doubt, there is room for the Reserve Bank to cut rates easily by, say, 30 basis points or 50 basis points over the next couple of months. So I think perhaps now they will sit on their hands, but thereafter I expect it at 25 and then at 25 again. So I'm not too concerned for what's happening in the Middle East at the moment, but as always, expect a bit of uncertainty, especially in the short term.
So have you seen an effect at pump prices, the price of petrol yet?
Yes, not yet, but I do follow the exchange rate and the exchange rate, and of course the international oil price. And at the moment, it seems to me as if we can expect in South Africa an increase in the petrol price of approximately 30 cents a litre or so. The most recent print on inflation actually remained at 2.8%, despite a bit of an increase in food prices. And the reason for that it was because of the previous fall in the petrol price. So we see a bit of an increase in the petrol price. It's unlikely to be have much of an impact on the inflation rate. So yes, at the moment it seems as there could be a bit of an increase in the petrol price, but like I said, 20 or 30 cents or so, and that's certainly not something to be too concerned about.
Well, you talked about tariffs earlier. So some countries have made deals. So what happened to most of the threat of tariffs or the fact that they would kick in at a certain time? It was in July, wasn't it? What effect do you expect from that?
On the South African economy, I
Yeah.
think, yes, of course it will impact on the South African economy. I'm pretty sure. But you know, Linda, it's so difficult to make a prediction or an estimate of what's going to happen because the political environment is so extremely volatile. I just do not know what politicians are going to decide next time. Of course, the tariffs are going to have an impact on the South African economy. I think AGOA is pretty much out of the window for us. My calculations suggest that it will have an impact on economic growth. Not that much, but every little bit adds up. And South African economic growth is really weak. We're talking about well below 1%. And of course, many other ratios will move in the wrong direction, so the deficit and the debt numbers and so on. But yes, tariffs are likely to impact on South Africa, not that much, but not that much is actually quite a lot for an economy that is hardly growing. And if the oil price remains high, if even increase further to $80, for example, or so, then that's not going to be good for South Africa because the Reserve Bank then will be in a position where they're probably going to leave rates unchanged. And the South African economy is actually crying for a reduction in interest rates. We need some relief on a monetary policy front. But the Reserve Bank, being very conservative, is really concerned about instability, future instability, like things like the oil price and exchange rate of the currency. So tariffs, I think the short-term answer is probably not going to have much of an impact, but an economy that is hardly growing every little bit adds up eventually.
Can we talk about the grey list? So it seems that South Africa might be lucky if the inspection goes well in October to get off the grey list.
I had the opportunity to talk at a money laundering conference not too long ago. That's an anti-money laundering conference, not a pro-money laundering conference. And I spoke to international guys that are actually very closely involved with this grey list process and the financial action task team and so on. And I asked him about, on the sideline, I asked him about what South Africa can do. And the answer to me was, there's only one thing that we need to do, and we will be off the grey list within months. And that is that we have to implement the Zondo Commission's recommendations. And I think the point that they want to make is that we really have to prove that we're serious to charge people if they break the laws in South Africa. And the Zondo Commission pointed the fingers to many very politically well-connected individuals. And our political leaders are just not acting on that. And that's the issue. The problem is that South Africa is seen as a country that do not take it very seriously to implement the law and to go after people that are implicated in wrongdoings. And all we need to do is simply implement the Zondo Commission's recommendation. Having said that, it seems to me, however, that the chances are quite good that South Africa may be off the grey list not too long, maybe this year sometime. I can also tell you I'm involved in international, the management of assets internationally for my clients. And if I want to move money out of South Africa, for example, into a bank account abroad, it is a real slip. Because other banks do not want to do business with us. If we want to open a bank account for one of my clients, it is very time consuming. My clients get angry at me because they think I'm dragging my feet. They have to fill in all sort of papers, and it's very costly and time consuming. It's difficult to move money abroad and just do normal business, trying to manage assets abroad. So I really hope that we're going to get off the grey list. It makes my life and the financial sector's life extremely difficult.
Dawie Roodt, thank you so much.
My pleasure.